And it just adds fuel to this fire. I mean, I want to throw out a couple of things that he says in the book. He points out that women initiate divorces 75% of the time. One out of every four men ages 25 to 34 live at home. 20% of men ages 18 to 34 don't have driver's licenses.
20%?
20%.
That's 1 out of 5.
Wow.
Isn't that insane? This is according to this book. And this is just an interesting thing that he pointed out. The fact that most women under 50 have either one or several tattoos shows that the women are more interested in self-expression than they are in men. Hello and welcome to the Brothers Random Show. My name is Travis.
And I'm Michael.
And we are two ordinary brothers discussing extraordinary ideas and some random shit. Michael, why are we here?
Today we are reviewing the book A World Without Men by Aaron Clarey. And today we are inviting our guest, Nathan Dilts. Thank you, Nathan, for coming on and joining us with this review of the book. First off, starting out, we're just going to kind of go over overall thoughts of the book. And Nathan, if you wanted to kick us off on that.
Yeah, sure. What an interesting book. I'm really glad that you proposed this book and that we read it together and discuss it. In a funny way, I don't know if you remember one of our earlier podcasts, we were discussing the scientist who was the protege to the gal who studied the silverback apes, and in his dream world, we would be bred out of existence with cloning, and we would be just a vial in a refrigerator, and
next to smallpox.
Yeah, we'd get rid of all those toxic men and all their aggression, and it would solve all the world's problems. And this book actually, and we'll have to look, we'll put down in the notes what episode that was, but we'll have to, it was a shocking podcast interview that we were reviewing. But anyway, in this book, these fellows decided to actually explore that idea. They were economists and statisticians, and they basically looked at the numbers and they said, okay, if we got rid of men, if Thanos pushed the gem and all the dudes just went, what would our world be like? And obviously, any sort of hypothetical like that, there's some fundamental assumptions and presumptions being made in anything. But it was a really interesting kind of thought experiment and an idea, and they tried as much as possible to base it on statistics. And so that's what this book explored: is what would a world be like without men? And interestingly, they even took two tacks. They took the Thanos green gem push moment, and then they took the was it the green gem? I don't know, but anyway, the gem push moment, and the boys just go pew. And then they also said, well, what if it was more gradual? And that's also really an interesting take in the book, because it is pointing out that with the marginalization of men culturally in America, and it is particular to America, with the marginalization of men in America, more and more of them are opting to step out of society and out of economy. And that even might be a point worthy of discussion later on.
That's a book by Nicholas Eberstadt, and he actually, the book is called Men Without Work, which was published in 2016. And then he republished it after COVID. And supposedly before COVID, there was 7 million able-bodied men in America who were not working at all, or not even looking for work. And now I think it's up to 8 million since COVID. So, but that's not the book we're talking about. The episode you mentioned, Nathan, was episode 21, The Eradication of the Y Chromosome, where we talk about Dr. Richard Wingham. This book uses a statistical analysis of the economy, the way the economy would work. And like you said, it's very interesting. It's of course a hypothetical, and but he does go into the stats that are already happening, like 8 million men that have basically left the workforce altogether, and the reasons why. When it comes to the statistics, I'm not good with statistics, but one of the funny things that he brings up is that women are mostly uninterested in men on a very general level, and they've done statistics on it. Now the women can get pretty much anything they want outside of men. So they can have families without men. They can have careers without men. They can have money without men. What it's done is it's basically removed the incentive structure for men to continue to participate not only in the economy but also in the sexual marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in this book, he mentions not he doesn't spend a lot of time with this, but he kind of mentions a fundamental carrot and the stick with men, which is basically that there used to be a time if you didn't get your shit together and go to work, you probably were going to starve and end up in the streets and die of exposure, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the stick, right? Well, nowadays, and he mentions with our welfare state that basically you could figure a way to gather a welfare check, sit in your mother's basement and play video games and eat Cheetos all day long. So that kind of removes the stick part. And then the carrot is like, well, if you want a woman in your life, if you want that, if you want the family, if you want the good life, right, then you have to get your shit together and go out, be Abraham, leave your father's house, go out and find your adventures,
make your dent in the world.
Yeah. Take your place in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And his point is that if you remove that, which in a way feminism has kind of done, like they've kind of
I think he does unfairly blame feminism, but
okay,
we can go down,
we can get into that,
finish that thought.
But yeah, he says that if women don't want to be with men and these men basically get the idea that they just don't have a chance, it's kind of like, all right, well, why try? And that removes the carrot. And so being in mom's basement, or not even mom's basement, but basically welfare, housing, whatever the case.
What was the actual number? It was like 21,000 a year will sustain you at a very, very low level. And he said that there's many, many men who are just getting that from welfare and doing almost nothing else.
I think the potent image he used to illustrate that idea was that he showed a small room that just has an empty and sheetless mattress with a TV and an Xbox, and it's like, yep, that's all a guy needs. And he's correct. Like,
he's correct. Yeah.
All of us, the three of us here, we know at least 3 or 4 guys who live like that, and they're very content. They literally have a bare mattress, they have a television and their game system, and that's it. And they're in a room of their friend's house or in a small apartment, and they're like, and they work at the fast food restaurant or the whatever, just getting enough to buy ramen, and that's all they need. That's all they need.
I wouldn't say the people that I know that are involved in that are very happy. I wouldn't say. And I do know, like you said, I do know guys like this. Mm-hmm. I work with many of them and have worked with many of them. And I wouldn't say they're happy. I wouldn't say they're content. I would say they're just getting by.
They're distracted.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a funny thing. Because like any addictive behavior, it's just a matter of distraction. If it takes your mind away from your life, your discontent, your general unhappiness, it just distracts you. Whether it's real drugs, which sometimes that's in the mix as well, right? Like when you're in there with just your game system and you play on it, another stunning statistic in here, and I don't want to start going off like popcorn with different statistics, but I think it bears on what you guys are talking about, is how men will spend at least 8 hours on video games on average, but they'll only spend 2 hours on porn. They are, and it's a funny statistic, but it just goes to show that how that call to the heroic journey or to heroism or being something bigger than yourself is bigger to them than even the pretty ladies bopping around on the screen. It's like they make it like it's the actual sexual component of this thing, while it's an absolute driver and it's foundational to this book and this discussion. It's not everything, and
Yeah.
and it's not even everything to guys who are always engaging in that stuff, because honestly, outside you can scratch an itch, but that's not the same thing as having a fulfilling relationship. And so it's interesting that the video game, where they get to be the hero of their little story, is a bigger pull than somebody pretty that's dancing for him.
Yeah, I agree. I think the pull to adventure, this goes to the sedated male theory that Chris Williamson and Michael and I have talked about this ad nauseum, because what it's doing is it's firing all the cylinders in the brain that would otherwise be looking out into the world for adventure. Instead, they're getting it in the virtual world, and they're not achieving their fullness because of this, because of this sedated male theory. And I believe that if you go off the statistic that there's 7 to 8 million men who aren't in the workforce, then that means you're right. All of their time is spent online, almost all of it. And it's unreal, and it's not true, and it's false false dopamine hits. That's what they're getting from it. Because I don't know about you guys, but when I've achieved something great in my life personally, whether I've built something or whether I've gotten a raise at work or whatever it is, what it does is it does throw into my brain this dopamine hit that is fleeting, to say the least, but it's also worth it to me to kind of continue the drive, to continue fighting, to continue in the world. And if you're getting that in a virtual world, then there's no incentive to do better in the real world.
To bring up your point between
Mhm.
an artificial or a phantom dopamine hit
Mhm.
versus a legitimate one, when you actually accomplish something or you create something in the world, for me, that hit keeps returning every time I see it. So, for example, I had an interesting experience years ago when it was the one and only time that I was let go from a job, and that was, man, that's a tough ego hit when they say thanks
Mhm.
but no thanks and they let you go. Um, and I came home obviously early in the day, because it had happened relatively early in the business day, and so I'm home early, and I think my wife could sense something was off, but I was just destroyed. And it was a really interesting. There was a fireplace that, like so many things around the house, that wasn't happening because I just was too busy, or I'd work all day and I'd get home and I was too tired, and I'll get it this weekend. Or
Mhm.
and I went at that fireplace and I had that thing built in like 6 hours. Like, I'd removed some old paneling and stuff, put new stuff in, made it look nice. Like, and every time I walk by that fireplace, I get that little reminder of like, I did that. It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
and
yeah.
so, and it's something that, and it's like obvious, but the interest with a video game where you pass the board or you beat the big boss,
Hmm.
there's no residual, like you think about that like, oh yeah, I no, it's like you have to go find the next video game, the next big boss, the next
It's a pride thing. It makes you prideful that you, hey, I did that, I made that, or I put that together, or I had something to do with that. And that's probably another thing, is that most of the work in society is less likely to give you a sense of pride. If you're working at a fast food restaurant, there's very little pride in that. I mean, that's why there's so many open jobs, I guess, nowadays.
And this ties into the book in an interesting way, because there's that famous study they did at college where they literally hired, they got like 40, 50 guys, like, and gals. I don't think they discriminate. They say, we're going to pay you $40 an hour to dig a ditch. And a bunch of guys and gals showed up, and they dug the ditch the first day. And then they came back and they say, okay, today we're going to pay you $60 an hour. I'm the numbers might be a little off, but the point is it was more. And they're like, we want you to fill in the ditch. Then the next day they offered him even more. They're like, now it's $80 an hour. I want you to redig the ditch. And they did this. And like by day 4 or 5, even though the number was that they were getting paid was getting higher and higher, less and less people showed up, because they were literally digging a hole and refilling it, basically.
Because there's
They
no
were
pride in it.
Yeah, and there was no sense of like, we're going somewhere and this is accomplishing something. Now, interestingly, a lot of these men's jobs that are talked about in this book, like repaving the road and things like that, I mean, I guess road workers get a degree of like, yeah, hey man, I built this road. Like, this road you're driving on, yep, that was me. Like, there might be a little bit of that. At the same time, the social recognition and prestige is so low on it. And after, so many hundreds of miles of pavement, maybe it's like, yeah, I built that road. Now, here's the funny thing about, and this speaks to that carrot and stick Michael was bringing up earlier. There have been jobs I've been in that have been monotonous or soul draining, and it's like, oh, and why am I still showing up day after day to do it? It's because behind that is me providing for my family. If there's nothing else I'm accomplishing, if the grind and the shit that I'm going through and eating day after day isn't worth it in and of itself, then it's like, well, at the end of the day, I hand my wife a big pile of money to go buy groceries, and she smiles at me, and my kids got a roof over their head and clothes on their backs, and that becomes the drive and the accomplishment for men.
Yes.
But if it's just me,
why stay in
savers.
it? Yeah,
there's savers. Yeah, it's like, I don't want to stand out in a 112 degree repaving road if it's just going to be for me. It's like, there's got to be something that's driving me to make it through the grind. And now earlier you were saying you didn't think feminism was a cause for this, and this book,
it's not. I wouldn't say it. Okay, so there are
the first quarter of the book is basically just laying out the feminism, like what feminism has done.
The book doesn't do this, but we have to differentiate between the first wave of feminism that brought about the equal rights and all that kind of stuff, and the current feminism that we are currently in, which is in for all intents and purposes is trying to eradicate men essentially from everything. It's being called is the fourth wave of feminism. So the first three were voting rights, work rights, and sexual rights. And the fourth one is now, for lack of anything better to call it, is dominant rights. They want to, the fourth wave of feminism is literally, we hate men, we want them to be destroyed, or I should say maybe a little bit of recompense, or they're trying
like
to get
removed. So like removed, they've had their time, so now they need to be,
yeah, men
take a
need to be
back seat. Now
yes.
they need to take a back seat.
Interesting. Okay.
And that's my take on the feminism thing, because he doesn't differentiate that, but I've
He
researched
talks
many.
about it. He mentions it. He does mention it.
He calls it the fourth wave, or does he? What
He
does he
doesn't
call
go
it?
into the different waves. He
Okay.
does just kind of in passing. He kind of mentions, he's like, now listen, this is a little different than just being able to vote.
Yes.
Our feminism nowadays and is a little more about man hating than it is about just
Getting the equal rights.
But also he goes into a little bit, now he's an economist, so he goes a little bit into like
The
them
pay,
socialism and things like that.
well, and pay gap. So he claims, and this is gonna piss a lot of women off. There is no pay gap. The pay gap is only there because men are willing to work more. That's it. That's the reason there's a pay gap. Now, a woman could get hired at a firm at a lower rate, but if she works the same amount of hours that the other guy does, she's going to get as much as what that guy's making. So that's the problem with the pay gap. The pay gap is the false flag, is essentially, and women really hate that when we bring that up, but it's got to be said in this book, because he is an economist and he does, run the numbers. There's a lot of facts behind what he's talking about.
I don't think too many guys would argue with first wave feminism. The funny thing is with second wave feminism, with work and with sex, the sexual revolution, second and third wave feminism, that is where we have to, I hope, come to an honest and introspective look at ourselves and say, are we being honest? Gals, if you want equality in the workplace, are you like every guy, not every guy, I'm speaking for all mankind. No, I think most everyone in America who embraces the idea of meritocracy accepts and understands the idea that if you can do a job better because you're smarter, more efficient, or you're willing to work harder, they deserve to have the fruits of their labor. And if you're willing to play in that sandbox, you like, and this is the funny thing, is women think that guys have a leg up in this arena. We don't have a leg up in this arena. As a guy, if I show up to any workplace where competency is required and I am incompetent, I am looked down on just as much as any other person out there. So the thing is when you were talking about fourth wave feminism is not only do the like on animal farms, do the pigs want to be equal, they want to be more equal. It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
well, I want to show up, perform however I want to perform, and I want to get the same results as if I was a highly efficient, brilliant, and effective employee, regardless of my actual performance metrics. And it's like, that's not how that works. And that's not how it works for guys either. When we show up in the workplace, if we do a crap job, we don't last long. And
Yeah.
either you're not suited for that job, or the other guys will just push you out. I can't imagine if you show up on a road construction work site and you're always ducking out or sneaking out behind the billboard to toke on a weed or something. You're
Mm-hmm.
not going to last very long. The other guys are going to be like, dude, you ain't pulling your weight, you're out. And that's how it goes, guy or gal. And so it's like the question becomes like, if America wants to be a real meritocracy, and that was part of the challenge he made towards the end of this book, because he was saying like, hey, gals, you can either step up to the plate, like you said, and if you want equality in the workplace, then step up and start doing all the hard stuff.
Specifically, he specifies the so what's happening is, what we're seeing currently happen is that women are going into childcare or hospice care, and men are going the direction of almost all manual labor, and And what he's saying is that if we're going to get to a point where it's an all female economy, the only way that works and doesn't crush the system, just falls down on itself, is if they take on the responsibilities of the manual labor as well. If that's the direction that we're going, and I honestly I don't see that happening because first of all, construction is very labor intensive. Oil field work is extremely labor intensive. We had engineers who are female in the oil field, but they did not go out and work. They threw out numbers and we did the work. And that's how it went in the oil field. The oil field is extremely labor intensive.
Well,
And
and not only is it labor intensive, but it's miserable. Like
yes.
it's not just the hard work part. I mean, we could go into the biological size differences and muscle mass and all that, and there's a truth to that, but we have tools and things. But it's sitting out there in 112-degree weather, sweating and just melting while you're doing this crappy job. And
Yes.
like, there's a reason I don't work in an oil field.
Yeah.
Like, so it's like not only do they have to, not the we could in theory come up with the tools and the means to overcome that physical difference, but it's like uh, I think the gals are smart wanting to stay in the air conditioned office and then tell the 12 or so guys, hey, go out to field 21B and cap that well.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like if you have a choice between 112-degree weather or being in the air conditioned office, saying go forth.
Yeah.
I know what I'd sign up for.
But that's what he's saying is that in this book, he's basically saying that all labor intensive jobs will be relegated only to men. And they are currently. What was the statistic? I think it was 98% of all labor intensive jobs are all done by men. And he uses some examples. He's like, sometimes women are brought into those environments, but more or less they'll be given the flagger job on a construction site or the pilot car on a construction site. It's the very minimally non-labor intensive jobs.
If we were properly introspective and properly honest, I think one or two things could happen at this second wave level. And like I say, we've got to fundamentally, as a society, make a decision of whether we're going to be a meritocracy or whether we're going to be socialists and communists and pretend that all labor is equal and has equal value, that labor is just labor. Or are we going to be a meritocracy? And if we're going to be a meritocracy, then we need to be real about that. And the funny thing is just because the way men have evolved hierarchically and everything, we don't struggle or fight with that idea. Every time, and you guys will understand that, well, every time I step into a group of males, into a gang of men, we instantly sort of subconsciously evaluate, okay, where do I fit in this hierarchy? Am I near the top? Am I sort of a leader? Or am I mid-level guy, or am I the weakest link? And we make this evaluation, and we actually will sort ourselves out really rapidly, and we're really honest, and I think it's just a product of the way society works. But guys, like, we will give deference to the males that we instinctually know are more valuable than us by merit, like, because when
They're
it comes
capable.
to life and death, we aren't playing games anymore. I'm not going to pretend that I'm, some tier one level guy
Mm-hmm.
who's, going to single-handedly take out all the bad guys when, like, I'm lucky if I even know how to operate the gun. It's like, that's not so we do this very instinctually. And in workplaces, when a guy is a better performer than us and gets paid better, the only time we start to get frustrated is when we're like, wait, we instinctually know we're higher up in the chain and we're not getting fairly compensated for our
Yes.
contribution. That's where we buck. If we're spilling the fry oil all over the place, we don't sit there and think we deserve CEO pay.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
pretty, but when this goes, I guess, and I don't know if this is the next discussion we're gonna go to, and this sort of starts to bleed over into the third wave question, but is are we willing to honestly address the concept of are there distinct roles between genders, either organically or, if you're from a more traditional faith background like myself, divinely appointed? And this is a question, and I'm not talking about chores, and I'm not talking about jobs. It's not guys take out the garbage and gals do the dishes. Not that crap. Both can do dishes, both can take out the garbage. I'm talking about fundamental roles. Uh, when it comes to STEM things, the way men's brains tend to work organically, we tend to incline towards mechanical, spatial, like beyond the physical differences, muscle and skeleton differences between men and women. Brain wise, you know, guys tend towards STEM fields where women tend towards, and in the book he addresses this, like, there's so many more nurses than there are, that
And
are
school
women.
teachers,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's fantastic, because I think they are uniquely suited and they choose those roles when they have a choice because they like doing them, whereas
Well,
guys like turning the wrench and rebuilding the engine.
Let's be honest. When he gets into, and I'll ask your guys' opinion on this, when he gets into why do men want to build big buildings? Why do men want to do all of these things? And his approach is that it's for sex. And it's interesting because his approach to it is kind of, he's like economists need to be honest and realize that economies are built on sex. Now, it's
The
not
sex
just
drive,
sex,
yeah.
the sex drive. So men go out and they do hard shit because they want access to women, and they want to have families, and they want to, these are things that they want out of life. So they'll go do hard shit. I seem to think that there could be more to it, right? There are, I don't know if you guys agree or disagree, but it seems to me that there would be a little bit more to it. That,
to make
maybe they'd want
something that's a driving force that I don't think really gets too far into, but like to make a mark on the world, to kind of the motivating factor. I mean, he does relegate it to the male sex drive almost completely is the reason that they achieve. Because if you take away the incentive structure, like our society mostly has, you get 8 million men who aren't working in the United States. And that's a small fraction of people. We're a country of 328 million people, but it's a small fraction, but it's a growing fraction. It keeps growing. It's not decreasing, it's increasing. And all the things that I looked at were like, they said 7, and then after COVID, they said 8. So it's like what it's hard to tell, because not everybody's going to be honest in telling people, oh, I don't have a job and I haven't had a job in so long. But a lot of men's purpose, he is right. Most men have 2 purposes. It's either to procreate in some capacity, or to have good work, to have satisfying work. And both of those incentive structures are slowly slipping out of the entire system.
They are
Because
eroding. You're 100% correct. And this goes to this question of, do we want to, whether you want to attribute it to evolutionary biology or whether you want to attribute it from a faith standpoint, are there roles, and are there roles that each gender, as a generality, not this is a generalization, but as a generality, are there roles that each side prefers? And I personally think they're complementary. And so this question of, I think the division of trying to blur the lines and say there's no roles and everyone can do anything and get all the same results. Obviously, I don't buy into that. I don't think that's realistic. And what's more is, other than being fundamentally dishonest when you really look at it generally and within yourself. It's like
there should be no forced roles.
correct, and at the
I
same
think
time, compulsory.
dictatorship
Yeah. I 100% agree. None of this should be compulsory at any
Yeah.
sort of regulatory or governmental level.
But I
But the
think
question is,
society
if
has screwed itself by making these less than ideal. And so
well,
what? So
no,
so
they
a mother.
screwed themselves because they use the government and regulations to try to compel the opposite. See, in the same way you
Yes.
can't compel them to be separate, you can't compel them by regulation and government to be equal and the same
Yes.
either.
Yes.
So
You're
that's a problem.
you're exactly right. The I would say that society has done a very poor job of elevating these gender roles. Instead, they demean the gender roles. So women are downtrodden because they have to take care of children, and it's like no, they should want to. And the same thing goes for the trades. We have shit all over the trades as a society. The plumber with the plumber's crack and talks like he's got a third grade education. Most plumbers are millionaires in our society right now, and no people, nobody's telling anybody about that. That's the problem, is that we've taken the trades and we've said, you're dumb if you want to go into the trades. And we've taken motherhood and rearing of children and we've shit on both of them at the same time. And so the society has split, and now nobody knows what they're supposed to be doing, and nobody wants to get into the proper trades, the proper gender roles, and that's where we find
And
ourselves.
more than that, if we just opened all the doors and said, hey, look, like if we stuck with what we were given as kids, like, hey, you can be or do whatever you want as long as you can really do it,
Yeah.
then that's fine. And we should have let all those doors be open and be like, hey, there's nothing that stops you except your own ability or your own drive. And
Yeah.
so you either can or you can't do it, and you have the motivation to do it or not do it. That's it. And if we just stopped right there and did nothing else, but like you said, no, then it became, if we have an inequality of outcomes, then clearly there's an inequality in the system and there's a problem there. And so we got to start reprogramming and messing around with it. It's like, no, we just give everyone maximum freedom and minimal restrictions as long as it, isn't detrimental to society, and then let them choose and they'll figure it out for themselves. There's a reason why 98% of the teachers in grade school are female. It's because they like doing that job. There's a reason that 98% of construction workers are dudes. It's because they like those jobs, or at least they're willing to do them. And so the question becomes is, okay, rather than trying to reprogram the roles, what government, for sure, if we're going to just talk about government and regulation and rules and labor and things, is they just need to step back and shut up
Yeah.
and say, look, we're the playing field's level and fair. You get to pay for the work you do, but realize that you're going to only get compensated according to what the market says this is worth. And then they shut up and step back, and they just try to interfere as minimally as possible. What society needs to do, and gets, I think, to the, and I'm jumping ahead to the solution, or a possible solution, is we need to get back to appreciating one another. And if the gals would realize, like, hey, we need the guys as much as we need the gals, and if the guys realize we need the gals as much as we need the guys, and we started appreciating each other for the things that we do uniquely well, if the gals realize, like, hey, I'm glad that that dude STEM is his bag, because heaven knows I don't want to be up to my elbows in grease. And if the guys were like, I'm so glad those girls are facing down a tidal wave of 37-year-olds, because that's the last thing in the world I'd like to be. If we got back to saying, hey, these jobs aren't equal in terms of the economic output or efficiencies or whatever, but there's value in all of that, and we honored each other for it, I think we'd start moving back into the right
Yeah.
direction.
And that's a thing that he doesn't mention in the book. So that's a astute observation of where we could go right with this issue. And it goes back to the beginning of the book where he's essentially talking about how uninterested women are in men for the most part. Men are way more interested in women. And this goes back to the Michael and I have been talking about this for a while, the bear in the woods scenario. Would you rather meet a bear or a man in the woods, and all this kind of and it just adds fuel to this fire. I mean, I want to throw out a couple of things that he says in the book. He he points out that women initiate divorces 75% of the time. One out of every four men ages 25 to 34 live at home. One out of every four men ages 25 to 34 live at home.
Mm-hmm.
20% of men ages 18 to 34 don't have driver's licenses.
20%?
20%.
That's 1 out of 5.
Wow.
Isn't that insane? This is according to this book. And this is just an interesting thing that he pointed out. The fact that most women under 50 have either one or several tattoos shows that the women are more interested in self-expression than they are in men.
Well, and this is where I'm going to make an argument for a faith-based system, because in traditional Western religion, Judeo-Christian religions, the argument is that Adam and Eve are absolutely critical and necessary to each other, and our lifelong purpose and mission is to become one in the image and likeness of God. And when you start honoring each other and treating each other and prioritizing each other like that, I make the argument that society works a lot better. Now, I understand not everyone's going to agree with what my view of a great life is. Like, for some gals, having no guy, the neck tattoos, the blue hair, that's their best life. And if that's their best life and the vision of their best life, more power to you. The great thing is, we're in America, you can do that thing. But for me, and this is a part of what this book is driving at, if you want to have the engagement of men, men aren't going to be sold on that. They aren't going to be sold on the another statistic he brought up in his book is that on a list of things that women prioritize, regularly men come in at 4 or 5.
Yes.
And it's like, you're behind the cat, you're behind the girl boss job, you're behind you're like, you're third, fourth, or fifth on the list consistently. For guys, the thing we think about when we have nothing else to think about is like our families and providing for them. Like, if we aren't providing for our families, if you're a guy with a family and you're failing to provide for them, that is a thing in your gut that is eating you from the inside out. You are thinking about nothing else except, what do I got to do to figure this out?
And this usually comes in later in life for men, because I've actually talked with men who had baby mamas, and it wasn't an issue when they were children, when they were in their 20s, but they hit 40 and they're going, I've got kids out there that I've never met and I've never seen. They're starting to go, what have I done?
Yeah. And so this is where this introspection and this real questioning of, like, okay, and stepping away from the faith background, just as an evolutionary biology thing, if you want to go that route and say, and you want to go with, okay, well, I like American society because right now American society gives me unparalleled opportunity. It gives me unparalleled wealth. I mean, the homeless in our country live better than people in third world countries. Yeah. Like, for that alone, just having those advantages, are we willing to come back to the middle where we say everyone only gets what they earn based on their merit and based on their efficiency and success? And are we willing to come to a middle where we'll at least appreciate and honor each other enough that we can make this thing called the American society keep moving forward? Are gals willing to recognize that guys, they need to have something to work for? And are they willing to step up enough to be the thing worth working for? And guys, are you willing to honor women and be willing to, like, step up to the plate enough that they can give you that honor. It becomes this question of, are you willing to mutually choose to come together?
Yeah. That's something, and that is something that he doesn't address in the book. It is like just the two sexes just coming together and going, "Hey, we appreciate you for what you bring to the table."
Yeah, he goes over the three things of like, how do we fix this? Now, I feel like a little bit unfairly, he places it completely on women. And the three things he goes over on like how to fix this is basically um women step up and take over in male dominated fields. So women become the construction workers, the road construction,
Yeah.
the engineers, like not even kind of all the way doing the 50 plus hours, doing the not just the bare minimum, because a
Yeah.
lot of these men they're going and they're doing not just the 40 hours, but
Hmm.
they're going above and beyond, right?
Yeah.
So he's like, that's one way of we fix this. Anyway, and then the other one was we just keep doing what we're doing and see how it, and just watch it all kind of crumble around us. And the other thing is that we get back to traditional gender roles.
Which I
Um,
don't think that's going to happen. I mean, honestly, I mean, I think that a war would make that happen. A major war, a massive war. And
Yeah,
I don't think that's good for anybody, but it may reset society back to its normal roots or whatever. But
civilization collapse is traditionally the thing that's reordered it. Now,
it's, yeah.
the funny thing is the question would be is if you're, and you can be humbled by circumstances, so you can be humbled by circumstances, or you can choose to humble yourselves.
Mhm.
This is the funny thing about men and women coming together and why we're so complementary is because each side has to give up some of our worst traits to become better than ourselves and meet each other in the middle. It's not anything you would compel or force. So we have to give up the bare mattress and the television in the corner and the Xbox and the porn, and we have to step out of that, and we got to say, oh, I got to put my hustle on, because no woman's going to want to live on a bare mattress with me,
Yeah.
with watching me play Xbox and shiggle off to porn like 2 hours a week. That's not a, no woman's wants to buy in that program. So I got to walk away from all of that, and I've got to step up to the plate and become bigger than myself so that I become desirable to her. And then she's got to give up my self-expression, my neck tattoos, my blue hair, all these things. And I've got to realize that these are the things that will draw men. And we all have to give up the worst parts of ourselves to come to the middle and meet each other.
It,
And
see, and I agree with everything you're saying, but according to this book, and he does lay most of it on the feminist movement, he's basically saying that uh, one has to happen before the other, because what right now what's happening is there's two sides that are just diminishing in their value. um because we've all seen this, right? There's tons of videos online about 40-year-old women who lost their chance to have children, and or there's 40-year-old women who have children from three different men and are living off of the state. And then there's these incels who aren't going to step up, who have already are living in their mother's basements, and they're playing video games, like we said. So both sides are failing each other. Is it realistic that we could get back? I don't think we can get back to a traditional society. Yeah.
on a whole society level, you're probably right. I think I agree with both of it. I think that's a tough sell. It's not impossible, but it would take a sort of revival or a renaissance that
Yeah.
we've
Yeah, that
rarely
would
ever
be
seen
it.
in history. Now, this is where it boils down to, though, and this is where the three of us had a few text exchanges in the background, but it's like, what are we going to do for our own children? Because this is where I think we can win. I definitely have made it a point to go to my sons and be like, look, I get right now this is a rough moment for guys, but you can navigate this and you can play at a higher level and you can play a different game. And if you're that guy, I have enough faith that, like, Rebecca appeared for the servant of Abraham, the girl will show up at the well. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're a stand-up enough guy, it may be a shot in the dark, but I just tend to think that if you are stepping up as a guy individually, there will be a quality girl out there that will, like, she'll be like a little light in the darkness. It'll be like two little candles that find each other. And same thing with the gals. Gals, if you are like I'll tell you that you could probably inspire a half a dozen men to go kill themselves if they find out that you're totally into being a amazing mom and a wife and supportive and loving, and that doesn't even say anything about whether you have a job or not, but just by virtue of the fact that you take care of yourself, you don't mutilate yourself, and you like the idea of having a family. A half a dozen guys would kill themselves and put themselves into shape to throw themselves at your feet, because, like, and the funny thing is this question of, well, whose fault is it, and that it's all being laid at, I think more than half of that is just where we're at in our society's decay.
I like the idea of the Renaissance rather than war. Okay, because a war would be devastating for probably 5 years or something like that, all out war, and then there's millions of people who have died, and then you're probably going to get back to traditional because people revert back. But I like the idea of the Renaissance happening, and in order for the Renaissance, and Michael and I talk about this a lot on our channel, pop culture needs to stop demeaning both sides of this. We need to the answer that he doesn't come up with, and I just thought of this, is that we need to show masculine, good men, virtuous monsters who are willing to die and to kill to protect their family and keep their family in the on a good path. And then in the same time, we also need to show women who are good and virtuous and who like having children and praise having children and having a good relationship with their husband. These two things we need I can't think of anything lately that has shown either one of those.
Actually, this is where I think I could give you some hope. Have you seen that ballerina farm controversy?
No, I don't know anything about this.
Oh, yeah, go check it out. Go Google it when you get done here. But there's this gal who literally, she was a ballerina, and we're talking good enough that she had a scholarship to Juilliard and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And she chooses to step away from that to marry this fellow, and she's basically Homesteader makes her sound. She basically chose to give that up, get married, and now she does this. She has this channel where she shows herself on this farm with her children. She has 3 or 4 children, collecting eggs, doing these things. And it was funny because this became this sort of TikTok or whatever social media platform she uses. It became this phenomenon, this, and like was huge. So this traditional legacy media gal comes out to supposedly do a story and interview her, and she basically writes a hit piece and makes it seem like the husband's some stalker creepo and she's a suppressed, Handmaid's Tale thing. Well, the funny thing is that rode for like a week, where all of a sudden everybody's like, oh, wait a second. Well, then the guy who is an executive with a major airline's like, yeah, you know what? That's not what happened, and that wasn't what the interview. It's like, this was a hit piece, and he's like, we're going to sue you now. And it basically ended up backfiring big time, because the couple came out, the gal's like, no, I chose this, he didn't stalk me, I chose to get married, I'm happy doing this, I would make the same choice that I did before. And it ended up actually just
Completely back.
catapulting what was
Yeah.
already a social. Yeah, and so,
Wow.
quite ironically, I understand your point about, like, the media's got to stop crapping on these
Yeah,
people that
they got to stop.
choose a traditional role. But if we show the truth, I think it'll prevail, because the fact that, so go check out Ballerina Farm. But I think we're going to see more and more of this when people do, when the new power couple, instead of power being like they're both high paid executives or lawyers or politicians, the new
Mhm.
power couple is going to be traditional families that are super happy and loving life, and people see that. I think that's going to be the next hit, and that's the way to win, is to show more of that, because it'll overcome girls. That all those TikTok videos where the girls are like, why in the heck did we as feminists sign up for this? Like, I hate working my 40-hour job and with my $250,000 of student loan debt and everything. What the
And
heck?
going
And
home
I'm
only to
childless.
my cat.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're all wishing they were ballerina farmer girl. It's like, well, all, but you get my point. I think all we have to do is show them the alternative, and they'll choose.
So
Yeah.
men deciding to answer the call of Abraham and women deciding to answer the call of Bel, right?
Yeah, I'm down with it. I'm down with it. Or Rebecca, or Rachel, or Leah.
Sure.
Yeah, Sarah, Rachel, Rebecca, or Leah. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and if we go off some of the things that Jordan Peterson will say, is he'll say that fundamentally, Belle is kind of the archetypal story for a woman. And in this situation, especially with Aaron Clarey kind of calling out, saying that it's up to women to change this. Now, I think he unfairly kind of puts it all on women, and I don't
Well, he
think
also puts it on incels.
he
Fairly
does. He
as well,
mentions
incels.
like, hey, you know what? If you guys are being gross and fat and eating Cheetos
And
and porn
lazy
and
and
lazy and the whole nine, then obviously this is going to keep going the way it's going, and that's not going to be good. Now, but he does kind of put the three big things that he says to fix this. It's all basically up to women, and
yeah.
I think he unfairly does that. But that's why I say, like, men answering the call of Abraham, right? The call of Abraham was, hey, you're in your father's house. And in this case, it would be, you're in your mother's house.
Yeah.
I'm calling you out. I'm the God of it. I'm the God of your fathers. I'm calling you out to go do greatness. Go do something, right? Go find some trouble.
I'm with you on that. Although I will point out something, and I want to be careful how I say this. The reason why Beauty and the Beast has such an appeal to us, both as men and women, almost universally, is that there is some sort of truth to the reality that a beauty that inspires can tame the savage beast. When I think about my life, I was inspired by a lot of women throughout my life. They, in a lot of ways, now you definitely need that father figure or that mentor or the wise sage to kick you out into the wilderness to go fight the dragons, for sure. But you only need one of those. So I want to throw that out because I want to give hope for gals. Like, gals, if you will step up to the plate, and not that it's necessarily all on you, but like I say, any gal who will just be like that inspiring thing, that bell, you can realistically, if the material, if the bones are good, you can tame that savage beast and you can turn him into a prince. And guys, obviously you want to be a monster, but you want to be a monster that's tameable.
I agree with all that you said. Before we go, I want to posit this idea. We're talking about what inspires men to do better. What can we find that will inspire women to do better?
I'm going to throw something at you. And I saw this video, and it kind of, it made my jaw drop a little bit. And it was just this gal, and she's just like, listen, I have been a feminist all my life, but I went out with this man and he insisted on buying the drinks. He took control in the date. He paid for the food. He opened my door and he guided me to the vehicle. And there was something feral. This is her words. There was something feral in me that just wanted to give myself over to this man. Now I'm not going to say that just men, if they step up to the plate and women will just start falling all over them. But Aaron Clarey mentions this. He's just like, why aren't you hitting the gym? Like, why aren't you diet, right? Like, stop eating Cheetos, stop playing the video games, stop the porn, like get out there and seek excellence. And there's a piece of me that wonders if this puzzle starts to get put together just a little bit more, if men would stop being soy boys.
I think that's a part of the piece. Here's my last take, and this is where I'm going to get myself in trouble. I think one big way that we can ask the gals to step up, homeschool. I'm going to say it. We get them out of these government programming centers where they're taught and socialized. And if you understand the nature of social contagion and how social contagions work among females differently than it does men, if we get them out of these government training centers and we get them into real life, like I'm in a unique situation where one of my children is only with me about half of the time because her mother and I are no longer together. And she's raised in this school, and she's got these girls, and she's on all the TikToks and the YouTubes and the Reddits, and she's girl boss, and she has all these liberal notes. And it's so funny because she'll talk a good talk about, and then I have her home with me on weekend. And it was funny because literally one weekend she was telling me the other day how she just wants to get a career and da 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 da. Well, the next day I bring her to church, and she begrudgingly goes with me to church. And one of the moms there had a brand new baby, and she put that baby in her arms, and to watch her just puddle and just turn into a pile of goo holding this brand new baby, it was like, well, that helped in the deprogramming station. It's like I got to be real honest. Like, my number one thing is and I understand not everyone can homeschool, but the point is to have a strong home and family centered life where you realistically be like, here, hold this brand new baby. Do you feel happier doing this or working on pre-calculus? Don't get me wrong, pre-calculus is cool. I get it. But let's get real. It's like, and it's the same thing with dudes. We could, and it works for them too. It's like, well, yes, you just beat Call of Duty Black Ops for the third time. How's that feel? Or why don't you and I go build a treehouse for your little brothers and sisters? And we got done with that. Which one feels better?
Thanks for coming on, Nathan.
Yeah.
Really appreciate you. It's always
My
a pleasure.
honor. Thanks for having me. I'm always up for a good conversation, so I appreciate it's an honor for me. Yeah, I'm glad I get to be one of the skull sword bearing brethren, if it's even for just one episode.
The brother from another mother. Check us out on social media, audience, Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Just look for The Sword in the Skull. Keep reading, keep listening, keep watching, learn more. Thank you guys. Have a good one.